Have you ever felt like something was watching you? That prickle on the back of your neck when you're alone in your home. I never believed in the supernatural until I brought home that antique mirror from the estate sale in Oak Ridge. What started as a simple decoration became something far more sinister. Something that refuses to let me go. If you're listening to this right now, consider it both a story and a warning. The experiences I'm about to share changed how I view reality itself. Make sure you're somewhere safe as I tell you exactly what happened, and why I still can't sleep with my back to any reflective surface. If you enjoy this tale of terror, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to hear more stories like this one, and share your own experiences with items that seem to have a life of their own. Trust me, after hearing my story, you might start noticing things differently in your own home. And now, our story begins. I found the mirror at an estate sale in one of those historic neighborhoods in Charleston, South Carolina. You know the kind. Oak trees draped with Spanish moss, creating shadows that dance across century-old homes. The sale was for the belongings of Margaret Whitaker, a woman who had lived to be 103 before passing quietly in her sleep. At least, that's what the neighbors said. Quite a find, the estate manager approached as I examined the ornate silver mirror. Victorian era. Mrs. Whitaker was very particular about who touched it. I ran my fingers along the tarnished silver frame, tracing the intricate engravings of vines and what appeared to be faces hidden among the leaves. How much? $50. His price was surprisingly low for such craftsmanship. He must have seen my confusion. Between us, he leaned in close. Mrs. Whitaker insisted it should go to someone who felt drawn to it. He studied my face. She had specific instructions. I should have asked more questions. I should have walked away. But something about the mirror captivated me. The way my reflection seemed somehow deeper in it than in other mirrors. "I'll take it." I handed over the cash. As he helped me carry it to my car, he muttered something that I didn't quite catch. "Excuse me?" I asked. "Just an old saying Mrs. Whitaker was fond of." He smiled politely. "Mirrors don't just reflect, they remember." I laughed it off and drove home to my apartment in downtown Charleston with my new treasure. My roommate Jess was out of town visiting family in Tampa, so I had the place to myself for the weekend. Perfect timing to redecorate our shared bathroom. The mirror was heavier than it looked. I struggled up 3 flights of stairs, the weight shifting oddly in my arms, as if something inside was moving. By the time I reached our apartment door, sweat beaded on my forehead despite the October chill. I leaned the mirror against the wall in the living room while I caught my breath. For a moment, just a split second, I could have sworn my reflection remained standing while I sat down on the couch. I blinked, and everything was normal again. "Just tired," I mumbled to myself. "That's all." That night, I hung the mirror in our bathroom, replacing the basic IKEA one we'd had since college. The vintage piece transformed the space, adding character to our otherwise modern apartment. I took a shower, and as the steam cleared, I wiped the mirror with my towel. The reflection that stared back wasn't quite right. My movements seemed delayed by a fraction of a second. I raised my hand to my face, and my reflection followed just slightly too late. I leaned closer, examining this curiosity when the bathroom light flickered once, twice. I stepped back, the hairs on my arms rising. For an instant, I thought I saw something moving in the corner of the mirror, a shadow that didn't belong. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish immediately after. Of course, no one was there. I was alone in the apartment. That night, I dreamed of corridors lined with mirrors, each reflecting not myself, but a woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. She followed me from mirror to mirror, getting closer each time I looked, her mouth moving as if trying to tell me something important. I woke at 3:17 a.m., gasping for breath. The apartment was silent except for the steady drip from the bathroom faucet. Drip, drip, Drip. I hadn't left it running. Wrapping myself in a blanket, I padded across the cold hardwood floor to the bathroom. My hand hesitated on the doorknob. The dripping had stopped. I pushed the door open slowly. Moonlight filtered through the small window, casting the room in a pale blue glow. The mirror gleamed in the darkness, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement within it, like ripples across water. I flicked on the light and everything was normal. The faucet was dry, no dripping. I must have dreamed it. As I turned to leave, something made me look back at the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, but its eyes seemed wrong, darker somehow. I moved closer, examining my own face. "You're being ridiculous," I told myself. "It's just a mirror." But as I reached to touch the glass, my reflection didn't move. It stood perfectly still, watching me, a slight smile playing at the corners of its mouth that I wasn't making. I jerked my hand back. The reflection moved normally again. I backed out of the bathroom, shutting the door firmly behind me. Sleep didn't come easily after that. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, telling myself that I was imagining things. Stress from work, perhaps. Or maybe I'd watched too many horror movies lately. The rational explanations comforted me enough that I eventually drifted off. Morning came with reassuring normalcy. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, birds chirped outside, and the mirror was just a mirror when I cautiously checked it. I got ready for work, deliberately avoiding looking directly at my reflection more than necessary. "You're being paranoid," I scolded myself as I applied mascara, carefully keeping my eyes on my own rather than on the reflections. It's an antique mirror, not a portal to another dimension. But that evening, when I returned home, things took a definite turn. I was making dinner, just a simple pasta dish, when I heard a faint sound coming from the bathroom. It was a woman's voice, humming a melody I didn't recognize. I froze, spatula in hand. Jess wasn't due back for 3 more days. I was alone in the apartment, wasn't I? "Hello," I called out, my voice embarrassingly shaky. No response, but the humming continued. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, and slowly approached the bathroom. The humming grew louder. With trembling fingers, I pushed the door open. Empty. The bathroom was completely empty. But the mirror, the surface seemed to ripple slightly, like disturbed water. And in it, I could see not my bathroom, but what appeared to be an old-fashioned bedroom with floral wallpaper and heavy velvet curtains. I blinked hard, and the image was gone. My normal bathroom reflected back at me. The smell of burning sauce snapped me back to reality. I ran to the kitchen to save my dinner, convinced I was overworked and my imagination was running wild. That night, I covered the mirror with a towel before going to bed. I felt silly doing it, but it gave me peace of mind. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of the towel hitting the bathroom floor with a soft thud. I lay frozen in my bed, listening. The apartment was silent, too silent, as if everything was holding its breath. Outside my window, even the usual sounds of downtown Charleston had disappeared. No distant traffic, no late-night revelers returning from the bars on King Street, no air conditioning units humming. Just complete, absolute silence. Then the bathroom faucet started to drip again. Drip, drip, drip. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. The screen illuminated. 3:18 a.m. I opened my text messages thinking I'd reach out to Jess despite the hour. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. What would I even say? "Hey, I think the antique mirror I bought is haunted." She'd think I was losing my mind. I put the phone down and sat up in bed. I'm a grown woman, I told myself. I can check my own bathroom without panicking. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I moved toward the hallway. The bathroom door was closed, though I always left it open at night. A thin line of silvery light glowed from underneath it. "This isn't happening," I whispered to myself. "This isn't real." My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. It was ice cold to the touch. took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The mirror wasn't covered. The towel lay in a heap on the floor. But what made my blood run cold was that the mirror wasn't reflecting the bathroom at all. Instead, it showed a bedroom. The same old-fashioned bedroom I'd glimpsed earlier. A 4-poster bed with heavy linens, wallpaper with faded roses, and sitting at a vanity much like my own was a thin woman with silver hair, brushing it slowly, methodically. 100 strokes exactly. I somehow knew this without being told. As if sensing my presence, she turned toward me, her reflection now facing mine. Her eyes, pale blue and clouded with cataracts, seemed to stare directly into me. She smiled, revealing teeth too perfect for her aged face. "You've been touching my things." Her voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a whisper that filled the bathroom. I tried to scream, but no sound emerged. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I could only watch as she stood from her vanity and approached her side of the mirror. "I've been so lonely," she said, placing her palm against the glass. "Won't you join me?" The surface of the mirror rippled like disturbed water. Her hand began to emerge from the glass, reaching toward me with fingers too long and joints too flexible. With tremendous effort, I broke free from my paralysis and slammed the bathroom door shut. I leaned against it, heart pounding, gasping for breath. From inside, I heard a disappointed sigh, then the sound of the faucet running full blast. I spent the remainder of the night on the couch with all the lights on, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building. When morning came, I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and researched the previous owner of the mirror. Margaret Whittaker had indeed lived to 103 according to her obituary. She had outlived 2 husbands and had no children. The article mentioned she had been a collector of unusual antiquities and had traveled extensively in her youth. A photo showed a stern-faced woman with silver hair and pale eyes. The woman from the mirror. With shaking hands, I called the estate manager. "The mirror," I said when he answered. "The one I bought yesterday. Where did Mrs. Whittaker get it?" A pause on the other end. Then, "I was wondering when you'd call." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Everyone who feels drawn to that mirror eventually calls." His voice was resigned, tired. "Mrs. Whittaker acquired it in London in 1952. It belonged to a medium who claimed it was a doorway." "A doorway to what?" I asked, though I feared I knew the answer. She never specified. All I know is that Mrs. Whittaker became obsessed with it. Spent hours in front of it every day. Said she could see things in it that weren't there. I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. I needed to get rid of the mirror, but something told me it wouldn't be as simple as throwing it away or selling it. That afternoon, I drove into a small library in the historic district, searching for information on objects that might be haunted or possessed. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Patterson, looked at me with concern when I explained what I was researching. "Mirrors have always had a special place in folklore," she said, leading me to a section on the supernatural. "They're considered liminal spaces, thresholds between our world and others." She pulled a dusty book from the shelf. "This might help you. It's about objects that serve as anchors for spirits." I spent hours reading about possessed items, focusing specifically on mirrors. According to various texts, mirrors could trap souls, serve as gateways for entities, or even create doppelgangers, malevolent duplicates of those who gazed into them. One passage in particular chilled me. The longer a spirit remains attached to a mirror, the stronger its ability to manipulate the physical world becomes. In time, it may gain enough power to cross the threshold completely. As I drove home, the sun was beginning to set, painting Charleston in shades of gold and pink. Any other day I would have found it beautiful. Today, it only reminded me that night was coming, and with it, whatever waited for me in that mirror. I parked outside my apartment building and sat in my car trying to gather my courage. I'd bought heavy black fabric to cover the mirror properly this time. I'd also purchased sage, salt, and other items the book suggested might help. My phone rang, startling me. It was Jess. "Hey," her cheerful voice was comforting. "How's everything going? The apartment's still standing without me." I hesitated. Should I tell her? Would she even believe me? "Actually, Jess, something weird is happening." "What kind of weird?" I told her everything. The mirror, the reflections that moved independently, the woman with silver hair. To her credit, she didn't laugh or tell me I was crazy. "I'm coming home," she said immediately. "I can be there by midnight if I leave now." "No," I said quickly. "Don't drive at night. Come tomorrow." I didn't want to admit that I was afraid of what might happen if she was in the apartment too. "I'll stay with a friend tonight." That was the plan, at least. I'd called my friend Emma, who lived just a few blocks away, and she'd agreed to let me crash at her place. All I needed to do was grab a few things from my apartment. I climbed the stairs slowly, my keys jangling in my trembling hand. The hallway seemed longer than usual, the shadows deeper. As I approached my door, I noticed something odd. Water was seeping out from under it, soaking into the hallway carpet. I unlocked the door and stepped into a nightmare. Water covered the entire floor of the apartment. About an inch deep, it was coming from the bathroom, flowing steadily under the closed door. "No, no, no," I muttered, splashing through the water toward the bathroom. This was real, physical damage, something I couldn't dismiss as imagination or sleep deprivation. I pushed the bathroom door open, expecting to find an overflowing toilet or burst pipe. Instead, I found the sink and bathtub taps running full blast, the drains somehow blocked. Water cascaded over the edges, splashing onto the tiles. But what made me stumble backward in horror was the mirror. It wasn't reflecting the flooding bathroom at all. It showed the old-fashioned bedroom again, perfectly dry, with the silver-haired woman sitting calmly on the edge of her bed, watching me with an amused expression. "Such a waste of water," she said, her voice sounding as if she were standing right beside me rather than trapped in the glass. "But I needed to make sure you'd come back." I lunged for the faucets, turning them off with shaking hands. The water stopped flowing, but the damage was done. I turned back to the mirror, anger momentarily overriding my fear. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. Her smile widened. "Company. It's been so lonely since I passed. The others never stay long enough." "Others?" I whispered. "The previous owners." She waved a dismissive hand. "They always get rid of the mirror eventually. But you're different. You feel it too, don't you? The connection." I did feel something, a strange pull toward the mirror that I'd experienced since first seeing it at the estate sale. But hearing her confirm it only strengthened my resolve to be rid of the thing. "I'm selling the mirror," I said firmly. "Today." Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "No one will buy it. No one but you." As if to demonstrate her point, the bathroom light flickered violently. In the mirror, I could see her bedroom growing darker as well, shadows elongating and reaching toward her. She didn't seem concerned. "You don't understand yet," she continued, "but you will. We're the same, you and I. We both know what it's like to see things others can't." A chill ran down my spine. How could she know about that? About the strange intuitions I'd had since childhood, the dreams that sometimes came true, the occasional glimpse of things that shouldn't be there? "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied. "Don't you?" She tilted her head. "Why do you think you were drawn to my mirror? Why do you think I made sure you would be the one to take it home?" The implications were terrifying. Had she somehow orchestrated the entire thing? The estate sale? My attraction to the mirror? All of it? "You're trapped in there," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "You can't hurt me." Her laughter was like breaking glass. "My dear, I don't want to hurt you. I want to help you realize your potential. The mirror doesn't trap me. It expands me, and it can do the same for you." Water continued to seep from under the bathroom door. spreading throughout my apartment. I needed to deal with the flooding, call maintenance, and figure out how to explain this mess. But I couldn't tear myself away from her gaze. "Tonight," she said, "at the witching hour, look into the mirror and truly see. I'll be waiting." With that, her image rippled and disappeared, replaced by my own ashen reflection. The bathroom looked normal in the mirror now, except for the flooding. I spent the next few hours mopping up water and making excuses to the building manager about a forgotten bathtub. Thankfully, most of the water had been contained to the bathroom and hallway with minimal damage to the rest of the apartment. By evening, I was exhausted but determined. I wasn't going to spend another night with that thing in my home. I called an antique dealer in the French Quarter who agreed to come look at the mirror right away, interested by my vague description of its provenance. Mr. Sullivan arrived at 7 p.m., a bespectacled man with a bow tie and genuine enthusiasm for Victorian artifacts. I led him to the bathroom, watching nervously as he examined the mirror with expert hands. "Exceptional craftsmanship," he murmured, tracing the silver engravings. "These markings are unusual, not typical Victorian motifs. Do you want it?" I asked bluntly. "I'm moving soon and need to downsize." Another lie. He named a price 3 times what I'd paid, clearly eager to acquire it. Relief flooded through me. "I'll take it with me tonight if that's acceptable," he said. "Absolutely." I couldn't agree fast enough. As he reached to lift the mirror from the wall, the bathroom plunged into sudden darkness. The light bulb had blown with a soft pop. In the dim light filtering in from the hallway, I saw Mr. Sullivan freeze. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "See what?" My mouth went dry. A face, not yours or mine. Someone else, looking out from the mirror. Before I could respond, Mr. Sullivan set the mirror down carefully against the wall. "I'm sorry," he said, already backing toward the door. "I've just remembered a prior commitment. I won't be able to take the piece after all." No amount of persuasion could change his mind. He left quickly, practically running down the hallway to the stairs, unwilling to wait for the elevator. I stood in my bathroom, staring at the mirror in despair. The woman's words echoed in my mind. "No one will buy it. No one but you." My phone buzzed with a text from Jess. "On my way. Should be there by midnight. Hang in there." I glanced at the time. 8:23 p.m. Hours yet until she arrived. I considered going to Emma's place as planned, but something told me the mirror's influence wouldn't be limited by physical distance. Whatever was happening, I needed to face it. I spent the evening researching more intensely, looking for ways to cleanse or destroy haunted mirrors. The information was contradictory and often steeped in superstition, but certain elements appeared consistently: silver, which the frame already was, running water, which hadn't seemed to help, salt, and fire. Armed with a container of salt from my kitchen, I created a circle around the mirror, which now leaned against the bathroom wall. I didn't truly believe it would work, but it made me feel like I was doing something. As the hours ticked by, my apartment grew increasingly cold despite the heating being on full blast. My breath fogged in the air. Shadows in the corners seemed to pulse and shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. 11:17 p.m., less than an hour until Jess would arrive. I sat on my couch, wrapped in blankets, keeping the bathroom door in my line of sight. I had considered covering the mirror again, but remembered how easily the towel had been removed the night before. 11:42 p.m. The lights began to flicker throughout the apartment. On, off, on, off. The television turned itself on, static filling the screen. Through the white noise, I thought I could hear a woman's voice singing softly. 11:58 p.m. My phone died despite being at 80% battery moments before. The singing grew louder, resolving into a lullaby I half recognized from childhood. Midnight. A loud knock at my door made me jump. "Jess!" Relief flooded through me as I ran to answer it. But the hallway was empty. No one was there. The knocking came again. from the bathroom door, which was now closed though I hadn't closed it. "Jess," I called out weakly, knowing it wasn't her. "It's time," replied the woman's voice from behind the door. "Come see." Against every instinct, I approached the bathroom. The door swung open on its own, revealing the mirror, now free of the salt circle I'd created. The grains were scattered across the floor as if swept aside by invisible hands. In the mirror's surface, I saw not my bathroom but a gathering darkness, swirling like smoke. And within that darkness, faces, dozens of them, pressing against the glass from the other side, their features distorted in silent screams. At the center stood Margaret Whittaker, her silver hair floating around her face as if underwater, her pale eyes gleaming. "The door swings both ways," she said, extending her hand toward me, "but only if you're willing." Behind me, I heard the apartment door open and Jess's voice calling my name. I had a choice to make. "Hello, are you here?" Jess's voice snapped me back to reality. I turned toward her voice, my survival instinct finally kicking in. "Jess, don't come in here." But it was too late. She appeared in the hallway, luggage still in hand, concern etched across her face. "What's going on? Why are all the lights—" Her words died as she saw the mirror, and more specifically what was in it. The darkness swirled angrily now, the faces more frantic. Margaret's expression had changed from inviting to furious. "You weren't supposed to have help," she hissed, her voice distorting, deepening. Jess dropped her bag with a thud. "What the hell is that?" "The mirror," I said unnecessarily. She's... We need to get out of here." Jess, practical as always, didn't waste time asking questions. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door. "No!" The scream came from the mirror, the glass vibrating with the force of it. Every light in the apartment exploded simultaneously, showering us with sparks and glass. The bathroom door slammed shut, trapping us inside. In the darkness, the mirror glowed with an inner light. Margaret was gone, replaced by a swirling vortex that began to extend outward from the glass. "It's coming through," I whispered in horror. Jess, still holding my arm, pulled me toward the bathtub, as far from the mirror as the small room would allow. What do we do? My mind raced through everything I'd read. Salt hadn't worked. The mirror was already silver. Water? "The shower," I said suddenly. "Turn it on, full blast." Jess didn't question me, just reached over and cranked the shower handle. Water poured down, quickly soaking us both. The vortex hesitated, the darkness receding slightly. Margaret's face reappeared, contorted with rage. "That won't save you," she snarled. "I've waited too long. You're mine." A hand, impossibly pale and withered, emerged from the mirror, reaching toward us. Behind it, the faces pressed closer to the glass, their expressions changing from terror to hungry anticipation. "Fire," I gasped, remembering the last element from my research. "We need fire." Jess patted her soaked pockets. "I have a lighter, but everything's wet. What do we burn?" My eyes fell on the decorative, scented candles I kept on the bathroom shelf. The ones I'd bought last fall, with their glass containers and wooden wicks. They wouldn't provide much flame, but maybe enough. I grabbed the nearest one and handed it to Jess. "Light it!" Her hands shook as she flicked the lighter repeatedly, the flame sputtering in the damp air. Finally, the wooden wick caught. A small flame dancing to life. "Now what?" she asked. The arm extending from the mirror was almost fully materialized now, reaching blindly around the bathroom. Where its fingers brushed the walls, the paint blistered and peeled. "The frame," I said. "The silver. We need to damage it." Understanding dawned in Jess's eyes. She held the candle to the ornate silver frame. At first, nothing happened, but as the flame licked persistently at the metal, a high-pitched keening filled the room, like a scream, but not human. The arm retreated slightly, Margaret's face contorted in pain. The engravings, I realized. They're protecting it. We need something stronger." Jess's eyes darted around the bathroom, landing on the toilet tank. With a sudden movement, she slammed the heavy ceramic lid of the tank against the mirror's frame. The silver bent, one of the intricate engravings cracking. The keening grew louder. The darkness in the mirror began to spin faster, the faces being pulled into its center like water down a drain. "Again!" I shouted over the noise. Jess brought the lid down once more, putting all her strength behind it. This time, a chunk of the frame broke off entirely, clattering to the floor. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The mirror's surface appeared to liquefy, rippling violently. The darkness condensed into a tight spiral, and from its center, Margaret lunged forward, her entire upper body emerging from the glass. "You fools!" she screamed, her voice no longer remotely human. "Do you know what you've done? The gate works both ways." Her hands, now clawed and gray, grasped at us desperately. But something was pulling her back. The vortex itself seemed to be collapsing, taking her with it. "If I go, you go!" she shrieked, making a final lunge toward me. Her icy fingers brushed my cheek, sending a shock of cold so intense it felt like burning. In that brief contact, visions flooded my mind, centuries of watchers, collectors, victims. The mirror moving from place to place, always hungry, always waiting. Margaret, not its victim, but its servant, recruiting new vessels for whatever waited on the other side. Then Jess was there, swinging the toilet lid one final time. Not at the frame, but at the mirror itself. The glass shattered with a sound like the end of the world. Shards exploded outward, then froze in midair, suspended for one impossible moment before being violently sucked back toward the frame. Margaret's scream cut off abruptly as her partly materialized form was pulled backward into the void, along with the glass shards, the swirling darkness, and the multitude of faces. Then silence. The empty frame hung on the wall, its interior as dark and flat as burned paper. We stood there, drenched and shaking, for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The bathroom lights flickered back on, though I didn't remember anyone flipping the switch. Outside the door, I could hear my phone ringing from where I'd left it in the living room. "Is it over?" Jess whispered. I stared at the empty frame, still feeling the lingering cold where Margaret's fingers had touched my skin. "I think so." We carefully collected the pieces of broken frame and the few glass shards that hadn't been pulled back into whatever was on the other side. We wrapped them separately in cloth, then sealed them in multiple plastic bags, neither of us willing to touch the fragments directly. The next day, we drove to different locations around the city, disposing of each piece in separate trash bins as far apart as possible. The empty frame itself we took to the coast and threw into the Atlantic Ocean during high tide, watching until it was carried far from shore. I'd like to say that was the end of it, that life returned to normal and the nightmare of the mirror became just a strange story to tell. In many ways it did. We moved apartments, of course. Neither of us could stand to use that bathroom again. But sometimes, when I catch my reflection unexpectedly, in a store window, a puddle after rain, the black screen of my phone, I see her watching me, just for an instant. Her silver hair, her pale eyes, her knowing smile. And sometimes, in dreams, I hear her whisper, "The gate works both ways." I don't know what that means, I don't want to know. But I keep all the mirrors in my home covered at night now. I never look into reflective surfaces after dark, and I check constantly to make sure my reflection behaves exactly as it should. Because the most terrifying thing, sometimes when I look away from my reflection and look back quickly, I catch it smiling when I'm not. Underscore 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 underscore. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please like, comment, and subscribe to hear more tales of the unexplained. Have you ever experienced anything strange with mirrors or other antiques? Share your stories in the comments below. And if you're brave enough, check out our playlist of supernatural encounters from around the United States. Remember to hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next upload. Until then, maybe cover your mirrors tonight. Just to be safe, sleep tight if you can. Story number 2. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you? That prickle on the back of your neck when you're alone in your house? The feeling that something just isn't right? Well, what I'm about to share with you happened in a small town just like yours. To a person just like you. And the most terrifying part? The case remains unsolved to this day. If you're listening to this in bed, you might want to check that your doors are locked. And maybe leave a light on. Because once you hear this story, you'll never look at your own home the same way again. Before we begin, if you enjoy this kind of story that keeps you on the edge of your seat, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below with your theories about what really happened. I'd love to hear what you think. Now, let's begin our story. It was October in Pinewood, Vermont, that time of year when the days grow shorter and the shadows grow longer. The maple trees lining Main Street had turned brilliant shades of red and orange, and a crisp chill hung in the air. Sarah Miller had lived in Pinewood her entire life. At 32, she worked as the town librarian, lived alone in her grandmother's old Victorian house on Elm Street, and was known by nearly everyone in the tight-knit community of 3,000 people. She was quiet but friendly, reliable but private, the kind of person who blends into the background of small-town life. On Monday, October 12th, Sarah didn't show up for work. This was unusual. Sarah had never missed a day without calling ahead. By noon, her coworker Diane became concerned and called Sarah's cell phone. No answer. "I'm sure she's fine," Diane told herself as she left the third voicemail. Probably just coming down with something and forgot to call in, but a knot of worry had formed in her stomach, one that wouldn't go away. By the end of the day, when Sarah still hadn't called back, Diane decided to drive by her house on her way home. The old Victorian looked peaceful in the fading autumn light. Sarah's blue Honda Civic was parked in the driveway, but no lights shone from the windows despite the growing darkness. Diane approached the front door and knocked, then knocked again, louder. No response. "Sarah, it's Diane from the library. Are you okay in there?" Silence. Diane tried the doorknob. Locked. She peered through the front window but couldn't see much in the dimming light. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. She called the local police, and Officer Mark Patterson arrived 20 minutes later. After confirming that Sarah wasn't answering, he used his flashlight to look through the windows. "Everything looks normal," he said, sweeping the beam across what he could see of the living room. "No signs of a struggle. Her car's here. Maybe she's visiting a neighbor or went for a walk." But Diane shook her head. She would have called about missing work. This isn't like her at all. The officer nodded. "Let me check around back." As Officer Patterson disappeared around the side of the house, Diane hugged herself against the autumn chill. The wind had picked up, sending dead leaves skittering across the porch with a sound like whispering voices. Sarah's wind chimes clinked softly from the porch ceiling. After a few minutes, the officer returned, his face now showing concern. "The back door is unlocked. I'm going to go in and make sure everything's okay." Diane waited on the porch, her heart pounding as the officer entered. 5 minutes later, he emerged, looking troubled. "She's not inside. The house is empty. But there's something strange. Her phone is on the kitchen counter, her purse is by the door with her wallet still inside, and there's a half-finished cup of tea on the coffee table. It looks like she just stepped away for a moment. But her keys are hanging by the door, so she didn't drive anywhere." What about her coat? It's cold out, Diane asked. Her coat is still on the hook by the door. A shiver ran down Diane's spine that had nothing to do with the autumn chill. I'm going to file a missing persons report right away, Officer Patterson said, his voice now deadly serious. Something doesn't add up here. The search for Sarah Miller began that night, but no one could have predicted the bizarre clues that would emerge in the days that followed, or the terror that would grip the small town of Pinewood. The next morning, a search party formed in the town square. Neighbors, friends, and colleagues all concerned about the well-liked librarian. They spread out through the nearby woods, calling Sarah's name, while police officers conducted a more thorough search of her home. It was Detective Laura Simmons who found the first strange clue. A small piece of paper tucked under Sarah's keyboard at her home desk. On it, written in what appeared to be Sarah's handwriting, were the words, "It's back again tonight, third time this week." Detective Simmons showed the note to Officer Patterson. Any idea what this means? He shook his head. No, but I did find something else unusual. He led her to Sarah's bedroom and pointed to the closet. Inside, all of Sarah's clothes were neatly arranged, except for one empty hanger in the center with a post-it note stuck to it that simply read, "Not mine." "What do you make of that?" he asked. Detective Simmons frowned. "I'm not sure, but check this out." She opened Sarah's bedside drawer to reveal a small notebook. Inside were entries dating back 3 weeks. The entries started normally enough: grocery lists, book recommendations, notes about library events. But the entries from the past week had grown increasingly disturbing. October 5th. Heard footsteps on the porch again. Checked cameras. Nothing there. October 7th. Found muddy prints in the hallway. I don't remember tracking in mud. October 9th. Woke up to find the kitchen light on. I know I turned it off before bed. October 10th. The feeling of being watched is getting stronger. Checked all the locks twice tonight. October 11th. Found an unfamiliar blue scarf hanging with my clothes. Not mine. Where did it come from? And the final entry, dated October 12th, the day Sarah disappeared. I know someone has been in my house. Things are moved slightly. The tea canister was on the wrong shelf. I think I heard breathing when I was in the shower. Called the security company to check the system, but they found nothing wrong. Am I losing my mind? Maybe I should stay with Mom for a few days until the entry ended abruptly. Detective Simmons closed the notebook, a chill running down her spine. Get me the security company information. I want to know if there were any breaches in her system, and I want to see the camera footage from the last 2 weeks. Officer Patterson nodded and stepped out to make the call. Detective Simmons remained in Sarah's bedroom, slowly turning in place as she surveyed the perfectly ordinary room. Everything was in its place. The neatly made bed with its blue and white quilt, the stack of books on the nightstand, the reading glasses perched on top. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and yet everything felt wrong, as if the room itself was holding its breath, keeping secrets. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye, a small piece of paper that had fallen between the bed and the nightstand. She bent down to retrieve it. It was a receipt from Kohl's hardware store, dated October 8th for a new door lock, a security chain, and, most puzzling of all, a motion-activated camera. But in the search of the house, they hadn't found any new cameras installed, only the standard security system that had been there for years. Where was the camera Sarah had purchased? And if she had installed it, what had it recorded? By the 3rd day of Sarah's disappearance, the entire town of Pinewood was on edge. Rumors spread quickly in small towns, and with each passing hour the whispers grew darker. Some said Sarah had simply run away from her quiet life. Others suggested something far more sinister. Detective Simmons had set up a temporary command center in the Pinewood Police Station's small conference room. Photos of Sarah and her house covered one wall, along with a timeline of her last known movements. The security company had confirmed that there were no breaches in Sarah's home system in the weeks before her disappearance. All sensors had been functioning normally, and no alarms had been triggered. The exterior cameras showed nothing unusual. Just Sarah coming and going, the occasional delivery person and neighborhood cats wandering through her yard. But something was still bothering Detective Simmons about those cameras. "Play the footage from October 11th again," she instructed the tech officer. "From 7 p.m. onward." On the screen, they watched as darkness fell over Sarah's house. At 7:23 p.m., Sarah arrived home, parked her car, and went inside. At 8:45 p.m., she stepped onto her back porch briefly, seeming to look up at the night sky before hurrying back inside. Nothing else happened until morning. "Wait," Detective Simmons said suddenly. "Go back to 11:47 p.m. The tech rewound the footage. "There. Stop. Do you see that?" For the briefest moment, there was a flicker in the top right corner of the screen, what looked like a shadow passing across the side of the house. "Could be anything," the tech officer said. "A bird, a bat, the camera adjusting to low light. Maybe," Detective Simmons murmured. "Or maybe not. What about the camera Sarah bought? Any sign of it in the house?" "No, ma'am. We've searched thoroughly. No additional cameras were found." Detective Simmons tapped her pen against her notepad, thinking. "Let's take another look at her computer." Sarah's laptop had been taken as evidence, but initial forensic analysis had revealed nothing unusual, just normal browsing history, work documents, and e-books. But now, Detective Simmons was looking for something specific. Check for any cloud storage accounts or email attachments that might contain video files from the past week. An hour later, they had their answer. And a new mystery: Sarah had indeed set up a cloud storage account just 5 days before her disappearance. Inside was a single video file dated October 10th with the file name living_room_night.mp4. Detective Simmons clicked play. The video showed Sarah's living room, dimly lit by a small lamp in the corner. The angle suggested the camera had been hidden on a bookshelf. The timestamp in the corner showed 2:17 a.m. For several minutes, nothing happened. Just an empty, quiet living room in the middle of the night. Then, a floorboard creaked. The sound was faint but distinct, coming from somewhere off camera. Another creak, closer this time. The detective leaned forward, straining to see into the shadows of the video. The room on screen remained empty, but the sounds continued. Soft footsteps, the gentle brush of fabric against a door frame, the almost imperceptible sound of breathing. For 15 agonizing minutes, the video continued. An empty room filled with the sounds of someone moving through it. Someone who never appeared on camera. Then, at 2:34 a.m., a shadow passed across the far wall, too tall and distinctly human-shaped to be anything but a person. And then, silence. Complete silence for another 20 minutes until the video ended. Detective Simmons sat back, her skin crawling. "Someone was in her house," she whispered. But how did they get past the security system? The implications were chilling. Either Sarah's intruder knew how to bypass a sophisticated home security system, or they had access to the security codes. Either way, they had been inside her house, moving around while she slept upstairs. "We need to canvass the neighborhood again," Detective Simmons ordered. "Someone must have seen something. And I want to know if any other houses in the area have reported break-ins or suspicious activity in the past month." As the team dispersed with their new assignments, Officer Patterson approached with an evidence bag. "We found this wedged behind Sarah's washing machine," he said, handing it over. Inside was a small black notebook, different from the one they'd found in her bedside table. Detective Simmons opened it carefully and found pages of what looked like surveillance notes. times, dates, observations, all written in handwriting that wasn't Sarah's. October 3rd. Subject maintains predictable schedule. Leaves for work at 7:55 a.m. Returns at approximately 5:30 p.m. on weekdays. Spends most evenings at home alone. Bedroom light out by 11 p.m. Security system activated nightly at 10:15 p.m. October 5th. Subject becoming more watchful. Installed new porch light. Checks windows before bed. October 8th. Subject purchased additional security measures today. Will need to adjust approach. October 10th. Subject set up camera in living room. Unaware of my access point, will avoid that area. The final entry, dated October 11th, sent ice through Detective Simmons' veins. Subject growing too aware. Time frame must be accelerated tomorrow night. Detective Simmons looked up, her face pale. This wasn't a random disappearance. Someone was watching Sarah, learning her routines, preparing to take her, and they'd been doing it for weeks. The question now wasn't just where Sarah was, but who had taken her, how long they had been planning it, and whether she was still alive. That evening, as darkness fell over Pinewood, the police expanded their search to the surrounding forests and abandoned properties. Volunteers continued to comb the areas closer to town, their flashlight beams cutting through the gathering gloom like fireflies. In Sarah's house, now cordoned off with police tape, Detective Simmons stood in the living room, trying to piece together what had happened in those final hours. The half-drunk cup of tea still sat on the coffee table. Lab tests had confirmed it contained nothing but tea, no drugs or poison. Sarah's phone had been examined. The last text she sent was to her mother the night before her disappearance, confirming Sunday dinner plans. Her last call was to the security company that same evening. Detective Simmons walked through the house again, this time looking not for what was there, but what wasn't. What was missing from this picture? She stopped in the hallway, her gaze drawn to the row of framed photos on the wall. Family pictures, vacation snapshots, Sarah's college graduation, and one empty nail where a frame had clearly hung until recently. Has anyone noted a missing photograph? She called out to the forensic team working nearby. No one had. Detective Simmons carefully examined the empty space, noting the lighter rectangle on the wallpaper where a frame had protected the paper from fading. Something had hung here for a long time, and now it was gone. She pulled out her phone and called Sarah's mother. "Mrs. Miller, I have a question about the photographs in Sarah's hallway. Do you know if one is missing? There's an empty space on the wall." "Empty space? No, all her family photos should be there, unless—" The older woman paused. Unless she finally took down the Pinewood High graduation photo. She kept it up even though she never liked it much, said she felt obligated since all her friends were in it. "A group photo from high school?" Detective Simmons clarified. "Do you have a copy?" "I should have one in our family album. I can bring it by the station tomorrow." "That would be very helpful. Thank you, Mrs. Miller." As Detective Simmons ended the call, she couldn't shake the feeling that the missing photograph might be significant. Why would someone take a high school graduation photo? Was someone in that picture connected to Sarah's disappearance? As she turned to head back to the living room, her flashlight beam caught something small and white under the edge of the hallway rug. A corner of paper peeking out. She crouched down and carefully pulled it free. It was a Polaroid photograph looking recently taken. It showed Sarah's bedroom window, photographed from outside at night. And there, visible through the glass, was Sarah herself, reading in bed, completely unaware she was being watched. Written on the white border in black marker was a single word: "Soon." A cold wave of dread washed over Detective Simmons. She quickly bagged the photo as evidence, her mind racing. This wasn't just a stalker. This was someone methodical, patient, and deeply disturbing. And they had been right outside Sarah's window, watching her, without triggering any alarms. The next morning, Mrs. Miller arrived at the police station with a family photo album. She was a smaller, older version of Sarah. The same serious blue eyes, the same straight brown hair now streaked with gray. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the album to the marked page. "Here it is," she said, pointing to a group photo of about 20 teenagers in caps and gowns. Pinewood High, class of 2010. Detective Simmons studied the photograph carefully. In the center stood a younger Sarah, her smile a bit forced, flanked by classmates. Nothing seemed immediately unusual about the picture. "Did Sarah keep in touch with many of her high school friends?" she asked. Mrs. Miller shook her head. "Not really. She was always quiet, had just a few close friends. Most of them moved away after graduation." "Did she have any rivalries, ex-boyfriends? Anyone she had a falling out with?" "Well, she dated Jason Mercer senior year, but that ended before graduation. And there was some drama with Eliza Cooper. They were best friends until something happened midway through senior year. Sarah never told me what." Detective Simmons made notes of both names. "Anyone else who might have had strong feelings about her, positive or negative?" Mrs. Miller thought for a moment, then slowly pointed to a tall young man standing at the edge of the group, slightly apart from the others. "Peter Whitman. He had a crush on Sarah all through high school. Used to leave notes in her locker, send flowers anonymously. Sarah was nice about it, but she wasn't interested. After graduation, I heard he'd joined the military. I haven't seen him around town in years." Detective Simmons studied the young man in the photo. Thin, serious-looking, with dark eyes that seemed to be looking at Sarah rather than the camera. "Do you know if he's back in town now?" "I wouldn't know. Like I said, he's been gone for years." After Mrs. Miller left, Detective Simmons immediately put her team on tracking down the three names: Jason Mercer, Eliza Cooper, and Peter Whitman. They found Jason quickly. He was now a successful real estate agent in Boston, married with 2 children. A quick check confirmed he had been in Boston all week, with plenty of witnesses to verify his whereabouts. Eliza Cooper was teaching at an elementary school in Burlington, an hour away from Pinewood. She expressed shock and concern when contacted about Sarah, and offered to come to Pinewood to help with the search. Her schedule and cell phone data confirmed she had been at work during the critical period when Sarah disappeared. But Peter Whitman proved more difficult to locate. Military records showed he had served 4 years in the Army, received an honorable discharge 6 years ago, and then nothing. No current address, no employment records, no social media presence. It was as if he had disappeared. "Keep digging," Detective Simmons instructed her team. "Check property records, vehicle registrations, utilities, anything that might tell us where Whitman is now." Later that afternoon, Officer Patterson burst into the conference room. His face flushed with excitement. "We found something. A cabin rental under the name P. Whitman, about 15 miles outside of town. Paid in cash 3 weeks ago for a month-long stay." Detective Simmons was already grabbing her jacket. "Get a warrant. Now." The cabin was located deep in the woods off a narrow dirt road, the kind of place where you could scream and no one would hear you. As they approached with a team of officers, Detective Simmons noticed fresh tire tracks in the mud. Someone had been here recently. The cabin itself was small and rustic, with darkened windows and smoke rising from the chimney. Someone was inside. They surrounded the structure, and after confirming everyone was in position, Detective Simmons approached the front door with Officer Patterson and 2 other officers, weapons drawn. "Peter Whitman, this is the police. We have a warrant to search these premises." Silence. Detective Simmons nodded to the officers, who breached the door with a battering ram. They rushed inside, clearing each room with practiced efficiency. "Clear! Clear! Detective, in here!" The call came from what appeared to be a bedroom at the back of the cabin. Detective Simmons hurried in to find Officer Patterson standing frozen in the doorway, staring at the wall opposite the bed. The wall had been transformed into what could only be described as a shrine. Dozens of photographs of Sarah covered every inch. Sarah at the library. Sarah shopping at the local grocery store. Sarah walking her dog in the park. Sarah at her kitchen window cooking dinner. Sarah checking her mail. Sarah sleeping in her bed. Years of photographs showing her aging from her high school days to the present. And in the center of it all was the missing graduation photo from Sarah's hallway, with every face crossed out in red marker except for Sarah's and Peter's. "My God," Detective Simmons whispered. But what sent ice through her veins wasn't just the wall of photos. It was the freshly turned earth she could see through the bedroom window in a clearing behind the cabin. Earth that had been formed into a rectangle approximately 6 feet long and 3 feet wide, the shape and size of a grave. "Get the forensic team out here now," she ordered, her voice tight, "and find me Whitman." As the officers rushed to comply, Detective Simmons approached the wall of photos, looking for anything that might tell her where Sarah was, if she was still alive. Among the photos and news clippings about Sarah were pages of handwritten notes, some dating back years. "She doesn't see me yet, but she will. We belong together, always have. Watched her through the window again tonight. She likes to read before bed. Security system installed today, codes 4791, main, 3382, secondary." Detective Simmons stopped, staring at the last note. That explained how the intruder had bypassed Sarah's alarm system. Somehow, Whitman had obtained her security codes. As she continued scanning the wall, a circled date caught her eye. October 12th, the day Sarah disappeared, with the words "The Beginning" written beneath it. And below that, a map. Detective Simmons leaned closer, her heart pounding. It was a map of the forest surrounding the cabin, with a path marked in red ink leading to a location circled several times. Next to it were the words, "Our new home." She pulled out her phone and photographed the map. "I need a search team at these coordinates immediately," she said into her radio. "And approach with extreme caution. Suspect may be armed and may have a hostage." As the team mobilized, Detective Simmons continued searching the cabin. In the kitchen, she found receipts for camping equipment, non-perishable food, and, most disturbing of all, restraints and sedatives. In the small living room, a laptop sat open on a desk cluttered with more photos of Sarah. Detective Simmons carefully moved the mouse, and the screen came to life, revealing dozens of video files with dates as timestamps. She clicked on the most recent one, dated that morning. The video showed a small, dark space, some kind of underground room or bunker, and there, sitting against the wall with her hands bound, was Sarah Miller. She was alive but pale, her hair dirty, her eyes wide with fear. A battery-powered lantern cast harsh shadows across her face. "Day 3, came a male voice from off-camera. "Adjusting well to our new home. Isn't that right, Sarah?" Sarah said nothing, just stared at the camera with a mixture of terror and defiance. "You'll see in time," the voice continued, gentle yet chilling in its calm certainty. "This is where we were always meant to end up. Together. Forever." The video ended abruptly. Detective Simmons closed her eyes briefly, processing what she'd seen. Sarah was alive, at least as of that morning, and being held somewhere underground. The grave outside might not be a grave at all, but an entrance to a bunker or storm shelter. She hurried outside to coordinate the search teams. The coordinates from the map led deep into the forest, nearly 5 miles from the cabin, too far to send the forensic team currently processing the cabin itself. "I'm going with the search team," she told Officer Patterson. "You stay here and process everything. I want to know everything about Whitman, where he's been, who he's contacted, any other properties he might own." "You think Sarah's still alive?" Patterson asked quietly. "I know she was this morning. Let's hope we're not too late." The forest grew denser as Detective Simmons and her team followed the marked path on the map. The autumn day was fading. long shadows stretching between the trees as the sun sank lower. They would have maybe an hour of good light left. After nearly 4 miles of hiking, they came to a small clearing. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about it, just a mossy patch of ground surrounded by ancient maples and pines. But as Detective Simmons scanned the area, she noticed something odd about a fallen log near the center of the clearing. It was too perfect, too deliberately placed. "Over here," she called to the team, approaching the log cautiously. As she got closer, she could see that the log was actually a carefully disguised hatch, covered with bark and moss to blend in with the forest floor. A sophisticated camouflage that would be almost impossible to spot if you weren't looking for it. Detective Simmons signaled to her team to take position, then reached for the edge of the hatch. It lifted with surprising ease, revealing a dark hole with metal rungs leading down into the earth. The sound of movement below froze her in place. Someone was down there, and they knew they had company. "Peter Whitman," Detective Simmons called down into the darkness. "This is Detective Laura Simmons with the Pinewood Police Department. We know you're down there, and we know you have Sarah Miller. Come out with your hands up." Silence. Then a voice drifted up from below. Calm, almost serene. "You don't understand. None of you ever understood. She belongs with me. Peter, I need you to come up slowly with your hands where I can see them. Is Sarah down there with you? Is she hurt?" A soft laugh. "Sarah is fine, better than fine. She's where she's meant to be, where she's always been meant to be." The detective signaled to her team to be ready. "Peter, I'm coming down to talk. Just to talk. Can I do that?" A pause. "You can come down. Just you. Anyone else tries to follow and you'll never find us again." Detective Simmons looked at her team. "Keep your positions. If I'm not back up in 15 minutes, or if you hear anything suspicious, come down." Taking a deep breath, she began her descent into the darkness. The ladder led down about 20 feet into what appeared to be a small antechamber carved out of the earth and reinforced with wooden supports. A battery-powered lantern cast eerie shadows on the dirt walls. At the far end was a heavy wooden door. Standing in front of the door was a man Detective Simmons recognized from the graduation photo. Peter Whitman, now 15 years older. He was tall and gaunt, with hollow cheeks and dark, intense eyes that watched her every move. He wasn't holding a weapon, but his hands were hidden in the pockets of his jacket. "Where's Sarah?" Detective Simmons asked, keeping her voice steady. Peter smiled faintly. "Safe, resting. It takes time to adjust to a new life." "I need to see her, Peter. I need to know she's okay." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I suppose it's only fair. You've come all this way." He stepped aside from the door. "She's in there. But I'm warning you, don't try anything heroic. This place has more exits than you know, and I can disappear with her in seconds." Detective Simmons approached the door cautiously, keeping one eye on Peter. She opened it slowly, revealing a larger chamber beyond. The space was bizarre. A macabre attempt at domesticity carved out of the earth. A small bed with clean linen sat against one wall. A table and 2 chairs occupied the center. Shelves had been built into the dirt walls, holding canned goods, books, and bottles of water. Battery-powered lamps cast a warm glow throughout the space, and a small propane heater kept the underground room surprisingly comfortable. And there, sitting on the edge of the bed, was Sarah Miller. She was pale and disheveled, with dark circles under her eyes, but appeared physically unharmed. Her wrists showed marks from restraints, but she wasn't currently tied up. When she saw Detective Simmons, her eyes widened with a mixture of hope and fear. "Are you hurt?" Detective Simmons asked her. Sarah shook her head slightly. "No, just scared." Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Peter stepped into the room behind the detective. "See, I told you she's fine. I would never hurt Sarah." He moved to stand behind Sarah. placing his hands on her shoulders. She flinched, but didn't pull away. "You can't keep her here, Peter," Detective Simmons said calmly. "You know that. This isn't going to end the way you want it to." Peter's face darkened. "You're wrong. This is exactly how it ends. Sarah and I, together, away from everyone else. I've been preparing this place for years, waiting for the right moment. My team knows where we are, Peter. More officers are on their way. There's no scenario where you get to stay here with Sarah." He smiled, an unsettling expression that didn't reach his eyes. "There's always another scenario, Detective. Always another way out." Detective Simmons noticed Sarah's eyes dart toward a dark corner of the room, where a second door was barely visible in the shadows. "What's through there?" she asked, keeping her voice casual. "Storage," Peter replied too quickly. "Nothing interesting." But Sarah's eyes told a different story. Whatever was behind that door frightened her deeply. Detective Simmons needed to get Sarah out immediately, but Peter stood between them and the exit, and his hands were still hidden in his pockets. She couldn't be sure he wasn't armed. "How long have you been planning this, Peter?" she asked, trying to keep him talking while she assessed her options. Pride flickered across his face. "Years. Since high school, really, but seriously, for the past 3 years. I bought this land under a different name, dug the shelter myself, a little each day. Installed the security cameras around Sarah's house last year, tiny ones, wireless, hidden where no one would think to look. Learned her routines, her habits. The security system codes, how did you get those?" He smiled. "Watched the technician input them when they installed the system. I was parked across the street, had a telephoto lens on my camera. It's amazing what you can see if you're patient enough." As he spoke, Detective Simmons noticed Sarah slowly, carefully reaching beneath the pillow behind her. Their eyes met briefly, and Sarah gave an almost imperceptible nod. "And the break-ins?" Detective Simmons continued, keeping Peter's attention on her. "Why risk going into her house while she was there?" Peter shrugged. "I wanted her to know someone was there, to feel my presence, to understand that nowhere was truly private or safe. It was part of the preparation, making the transition easier when the time came." "The transition to this place? To being your prisoner?" His expression hardened. "Not my prisoner, my partner, my other half. Sarah and I belong together. We always have." "That's not true," Sarah spoke suddenly, her voice stronger now. "We were never together, Peter. You built this fantasy in your head, but it's not real. It was never real." Peter turned toward her, his face contorting with sudden anger. "Don't say that. You know it's not true. We had a connection. Everyone could see it." In that moment of distraction, Sarah pulled a small object from beneath the pillow. A sharp piece of metal that looked like it had been broken off from something larger. And Detective Simmons made her move, drawing her weapon and pointing it at Peter. "Hands where I can see them now," she commanded. Peter's hands emerged from his pockets, empty, but rather than surrender, a strange calm came over his face. "I told you there was always another way out," he said softly, stepping backward toward the mysterious second door. "I've prepared for this possibility too." He reached behind him and opened the door, revealing not a storage room, but a dark tunnel disappearing into the earth. "Last chance, Sarah," he said, his eyes never leaving her face. "Come with me now, or stay with them, but if you stay, you'll never see me again." "That's what I'm counting on," Sarah whispered. Peter's face transformed with grief and rage. For a moment, Detective Simmons thought he might lunge at Sarah, but instead he backed into the tunnel. "You'll miss me when I'm gone," he said. "You'll realize what you've thrown away." "Don't move!" Detective Simmons shouted, advancing toward him. But Peter gave one last sad smile and slipped into the darkness. By the time Detective Simmons reached the tunnel entrance, she could hear the sounds of earth collapsing somewhere in the distance. He had triggered some kind of cave-in, sealing his escape route. Story number 3. You ever noticed how shadows sometimes seem to move on their own? That slight shift in the corner of your eye that makes you do a double take, only to find nothing there when you look directly. What if I told you that sometimes those shadows are watching you? That in certain places where history runs deep and secrets lie buried, the darkness holds memories that refuse to fade. Tonight's story might have you checking the corners of your room before you drift off to sleep. But don't worry, I'm sure those shadows in your bedroom are completely normal. Probably. I've uncovered a tale from a small town in New England that a few have heard and fewer believe. A story about an old house, a forgotten family curse, and the unfortunate souls who stumbled upon it. What makes this tale particularly chilling is how ordinary it begins, with a simple house viewing, something any of us might do. So, get comfortable, pull your blankets close, and listen carefully. Because the most terrifying things often hide in plain sight, in the shadows we choose to ignore. If you enjoy this story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales that will keep you up at night, wondering what might be lurking in the darkness of your own home. And if you've ever experienced something strange with shadows or in an old house, share your story in the comments below. Now, let me take you to Willowbrook Manor, where our story begins. The story begins. It was mid-September when I first saw Willowbrook Manor, the kind of perfect fall day that New England is famous for. Crisp air, golden sunlight, and maple trees just beginning to blush with autumn colors. I'd moved from California to Massachusetts for a job at a tech startup in Boston, but after 6 months of cramped apartment living, I was ready for something different, something with character. It's quite a unique property, my realtor, Diane, said as we pulled into the long gravel driveway. Built in 1887 by a shipping merchant named Thaddeus Willowbrook. She paused, checking something on her tablet. It's been vacant for about 3 years now. The previous owners moved out rather suddenly. I barely heard her. The house commanded all my attention. 3 stories of Victorian grandeur, with a wraparound porch, ornate gingerbread trim, and a widow's walk atop the slate-gray roof. Despite needing a fresh coat of paint and some obvious repairs, it was exactly what I'd been looking for. Something authentically New England, with history in its bones. It's perfect, I said, perhaps too quickly. Diane gave me an odd look. You haven't even seen the inside yet, Andrew. I know, but it just feels right. And it did. Like the house had been waiting for me. As we climbed the porch steps, I noticed the door knocker. An intricate brass piece shaped like a twisted tree with spreading branches. That's unusual, I said, reaching out to touch it. Oh, that's the Willowbrook family emblem, Diane explained. Supposedly, Thaddeus had them custom-made for all his properties. Something about his family's connection to an ancient tree. She shrugged. People were into strange symbolism back then. The door creaked open, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to echo through the house. The foyer was grand, with a sweeping staircase and wood-paneled walls that glowed warm honey gold in the afternoon sunlight streaming through stained glass windows. Most of the original features are intact, Diane said, her voice taking on the practiced enthusiasm of a sales pitch. Hardwood floors throughout, 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, though only one is original to the house. There's a library, formal dining room, and the kitchen was updated about 15 years ago. I wandered into what must have been the living room, taking in the ornate fireplace with its marble mantel. Despite the warmth of the September day, the room felt cool. Not unpleasantly so, just noticeably. Like stepping into shade on a sunny day. Does the heating work well? I asked. Oh yes, they installed a modern system about 10 years back. Though these old houses can be drafty, it's part of their charm. We continued through the first floor, the formal dining room with built-in china cabinets, a surprisingly modernized kitchen, a small breakfast nook, and a study with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Each room was more perfect than the last, though I couldn't help noticing that some of the shadows seemed oddly dense, particularly in corners or beneath furniture. I chalked it up to the unusual lighting from the antique fixtures and stained glass. "Should we see upstairs?" Diane suggested, and I nodded eagerly. The main staircase curved elegantly upward, its banister smooth beneath my hand from generations of use. As we ascended, I noticed what looked like carvings on the newel post, the same twisted tree design as the door knocker. "The family really liked their tree emblem, huh?" I commented. Diane nodded. "It's throughout the house. Wait until you see the master bedroom. There's an entire wall panel carved with it." The second-floor hallway was long and wide, with doors leading to 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The master suite was spectacular, spacious, with tall windows overlooking the back gardens and a fireplace of its own. And, true to Diane's word, one entire wall featured an intricate carved panel depicting a massive, gnarled tree with spreading branches and deep roots. "Wow," I breathed, moving closer to examine it. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, with such detail that the wood almost seemed to move, the branches appearing to sway slightly as shadows played across them. I blinked, stepping back. For just a moment, I could have sworn one of the shadows had detached itself from the carving. A trick of the light, surely. "It's quite something, isn't it?" Diane said, oblivious to my momentary unease. "Now, there's one more floor, plus the basement if you want to see it." "Definitely," I said, trying to shake off the strange feeling. "Let's see it all." The third floor contained another bedroom, a small study and access to the widow's walk, a narrow balcony encircling the peak of the house that offered stunning views of the surrounding countryside. Below us stretched acres of woodland, ablaze with early autumn colors. "The property includes 5 acres, Diane explained, most of it wooded. There's a small gardener's cottage at the edge of the property, though it needs substantial renovation." I barely heard her, mesmerized by the view and the strange sense of rightness I felt. This was it. This was home. "What's the asking price again?" I asked. Diane hesitated, just briefly, but I caught it. "It's well below market for a property this size. $650,000 for a 5-bedroom Victorian on 5 acres, less than an hour from Boston." It was suspiciously low. "What's the catch?" I asked. "Foundation issues? Termites? Asbestos?" "Nothing like that," she assured me. "The inspection came back relatively clean for a house this age. It's just, well, the house has a bit of a reputation locally." "A reputation?" She looked uncomfortable. "There have been some stories. Nothing substantiated, of course, just small-town gossip about the house being unlucky." "Unlucky how?" "Oh, you know how these things go. A few families moved out unexpectedly. Strange noises, claims of unusual occurrences." She waved a hand dismissively. "Every old house has stories. It's just reduced the buyer pool a bit." I should have pressed for details, should have asked exactly what unusual occurrences meant. But the house had already cast its spell on me. "I want to make an offer," I said. Diane looked surprised. "Don't you want to see the basement first?" I shook my head. "I've seen enough. I want this house." Her surprise morphed into relief. "Well, that's wonderful. Let's go back to the office and draw up the paperwork." As we descended the stairs, I couldn't help feeling watched, as if the house itself was observing us. The shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, and I could have sworn I saw one shift against the wall, moving contrary to the angle of the sunlight. But by the time we reached the front door, I'd convinced myself it was just excitement making my imagination run wild. If only I'd paid more attention to those shadows, to the way they seemed to follow us down the stairs, to the faint whisper that might have been the wind, or might have been something else entirely, saying, Welcome home. 6 weeks later, I moved in. The closing had gone smoothly, almost too smoothly, as if the sellers were eager to be rid of the property. It was a bright Saturday morning in early November, and my college friend Mark had driven up from New York to help me move. "Man, you weren't kidding about this place," he said, whistling appreciatively as he carried a box up the porch steps. "It's straight out of a horror movie." I laughed. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." "No, I mean it looks amazing. Just imposing, like it's got stories to tell." If only he knew how right he was. We spent the day hauling furniture and boxes, arranging my meager possessions in the vast spaces of Willowbrook Manor. By sunset, we'd made decent progress, though the house still felt largely empty, my modern furniture looking somewhat out of place against the Victorian architecture. "I should head back soon," Mark said as we collapsed onto my couch with pizza and beers. "Got a long drive ahead." "You sure you don't want to stay the night?" I offered. "There are plenty of bedrooms." He glanced around, then shook his head. "Nah, I told Lisa I'd be back tonight. Besides," he lowered his voice dramatically, "I don't want to end up as the friend who gets killed first in your horror movie house." I threw a pizza crust at him. Very funny. After Mark left, the house felt suddenly vast and empty and quiet. Too quiet, almost. I'd lived in cities my whole life, and the deep silence of rural Massachusetts was unsettling. Every creak and groan of the old house seemed magnified. I decided to explore a bit more thoroughly now that the place was mine. The basement, which I'd skipped during the viewing, was first on my list. Flipping on the light, I descended a narrow staircase into a surprisingly large space with a concrete floor and stone foundation walls. Old shelving units lined the walls, and a massive coal furnace, long since decommissioned, squatted in one corner like a metal beast. What caught my eye, though, was a door in the far wall, wooden, with that same twisted tree symbol carved into it. It looked older than anything else in the basement, with iron hinges and a heavy padlock securing it shut. I approached slowly, curious. The padlock was modern, shiny and new compared to the ancient door. Someone had wanted this door securely locked, and recently. I made a mental note to ask my realtor about it, or to look for the key among those I'd been given at closing. As I turned to head back upstairs, I noticed something odd about the shadows in the corner behind the old furnace. They seemed deeper than they should be, darker, and for a brief, unsettling moment, I could have sworn I saw movement within them, a slight shifting, like something adjusting its position. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish even as I did so. "Is someone there?" Nothing responded, of course. Just the settling sounds of an old house. And perhaps, though I tried to convince myself otherwise, the faint sound of whispering, too distant to make out words. I hurried back upstairs, suddenly eager to be in the light. That night was my first in Willowbrook Manor, and it set the pattern for many to follow. I fell asleep easily enough in the massive master bedroom, the tree carving on the wall watching over me like a strange guardian. But I woke abruptly at 3:17 a.m. I remember checking my phone, with the absolute certainty that someone was in the room with me. I lay frozen, listening to the sound of soft breathing that wasn't my own. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to have substance, a density that normal darkness shouldn't possess. And the carved tree. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, it looked different. The branches seemed to extend further, reaching across the wall toward my bed. "This isn't real," I whispered to myself. "New house jitters." But even as I said it, I saw one of the shadows detach itself from the wall. A darker patch of darkness that drifted slowly across the floor toward my bed. I squeezed my eyes shut, heart hammering in my chest, certain that when I opened them, something would be looming over me. 1, 2, 3. I opened my eyes. The room was normal. No moving shadows, no extended branches on the carving, just an old bedroom in the pale light of early morning. The first hints of dawn visible through the curtains. I didn't fall back asleep. The next several days passed in a blur of unpacking and settling in. I worked remotely most days, setting up my home office in the second-floor study. Strange incidents continued, shadows that moved when they shouldn't, whispers at the edge of hearing, the persistent feeling of being watched. But they were subtle enough that I could almost convince myself it was just the quirks of an old house combined with my imagination. Almost. It was the tree carvings that eventually led me to the truth. They were everywhere in the house. The door knocker, the newel post, the wall panel in my bedroom, smaller versions on cabinet doors and fireplace mantels. One evening, about 2 weeks after moving in, I decided to research the symbol. My search for Willowbrook family tree symbol yielded nothing useful, but when I broadened it to New England family tree carvings, I found an obscure academic paper on colonial-era symbolism. There, in a small footnote, was a reference to the arbor umbrae, the shadow tree, associated with the Willowbrook merchant family and their reputed practice of unorthodox rituals in the late 19th century. Intrigued, I dug deeper. Most information about the Willowbrooks was mundane: shipping manifests, business records, society announcements. But in the digital archives of the local historical society, I found something else. A newspaper clipping from 1891 reporting the mysterious death of Thaddeus Willowbrook, found in the basement of his home under circumstances most peculiar and unsettling. The article was frustratingly vague, mentioning only that Willowbrook had been engaged in activities of a questionable nature, and that his body was discovered in a state of singular preservation despite evidence suggesting death had occurred several days prior. More disturbing was a small item from 1892, reporting that Willowbrook's widow and children had abruptly left the estate, claiming it was inhabited by shadows that moved of their own accord. My blood ran cold. Shadows that moved of their own accord. Exactly what I'd been experiencing. And I printed these articles, along with everything else I could find about the Willowbrook family and their home. There wasn't much. A few more references to unusual occurrences at the estate over the years, reports of subsequent owners leaving suddenly, often without explanation. The house had changed hands more than 30 times in its 138-year history, with no family staying longer than 7 years. And then I found the journal. It was pure chance. I'd been clearing out an old steamer trunk in the attic, thinking I might refinish it as a coffee table, when I discovered a false bottom. Beneath it lay a leather-bound volume, its pages yellowed with age, the handwriting spidery and faded. It was the journal of Thaddeus Willowbrook himself, spanning the years 1885 to 1891. The early entries were mundane: business dealings, family matters, complaints about the weather. But as 1887 approached, the year the house was built, the tone changed. Willowbrook wrote of discovering an ancient text of most curious provenance during a business trip to the Orient. He described illustrations of a great tree that exists between worlds, its roots in our reality, but its branches extending into realms beyond mortal comprehension. According to the text, this shadow tree could be summoned through specific rituals, creating a bridge between worlds that would grant the summoner power beyond mortal reckoning and life beyond natural spans. Willowbrook had become obsessed with the idea, designing his new home with the tree symbol incorporated throughout, creating what he called anchors for the ritual. The final entries were increasingly erratic, describing successful contact with entities from the shadow realm and preparations for a grand ritual that would fully manifest the shadow tree in our world. The last entry, dated October 31st, 1891, read simply, "Tonight I ascend. The shadows come for me as promised. The tree awakens." He had died, or ascended, as he put it, that very night. I sat in the attic, surrounded by dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight, a cold weight settling in my stomach. It was absurd, the ravings of a man clearly lost to delusion or madness, and yet the shadows in my house moved. Oh, the whispers in the walls grew louder each night. And sometimes when I looked at the carved tree panel in my bedroom, I could swear the branches were in different positions than they had been the day before. That night, I dreamed of the tree. In my dream, I stood before the carved panel in my bedroom, but it was no longer just a carving. It had depth, a three-dimensional passageway leading into darkness, and from that darkness emerged shadows that took on half-formed shapes, reaching for me with limbs that weren't quite arms, speaking in voices that weren't quite human. "The cycle continues," they whispered. "The tree must feed." I jerked awake, heart racing, to find myself standing before the carved panel, my hand outstretched toward it, and in the wood beneath my fingers I felt movement, as if something on the other side was pressing back. I recoiled, switching on every light in the room. The carving appeared normal again, just intricate craftsmanship in old wood. But now I noticed something I'd overlooked before. Tiny symbols carved into the tree's roots, so small they were barely visible. They matched symbols I'd seen in Willowbrook's journal, symbols he claimed were words of summoning. Sleep was impossible after that. I spent the remainder of the night researching obscure occult practices and tree symbolism in various mythologies. What I found was disturbing. Across numerous cultures, trees served as symbols of connection between worlds, their roots in the underworld, trunks in the mortal realm, and branches reaching toward the heavens. Some traditions spoke of trees that existed in shadow form, accessible only through specific rituals or at specific times. More disturbing were references to feeding such entities, typically through blood sacrifice or in some accounts by offering years of life or essence of soul. Had Thaddeus Willowbrook actually discovered something real? Had he somehow bound his home to this shadow tree, creating a conduit between worlds? It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was mounting that something beyond natural explanation was happening in my house. The next day, I remembered the locked door in the basement, the one with the tree symbol carved into it. Whatever Willowbrook had done, that door might hold answers. I gathered all the keys I'd received at closing and headed downstairs. None of them fit the padlock. Frustrated, I examined the door more closely. The tree carving here was different from the others in the house, more detailed, almost lifelike. And as I studied it, I noticed that certain branches formed what might be letters or words in a language I didn't recognize, except that I had seen similar symbols in Willowbrook's journal. On impulse, I pressed my palm against the carving, tracing the pattern of branches with my fingers. The wood felt warm beneath my touch, almost vibrating with energy. And then, though I might have imagined it, I felt the slightest give, as if a hidden mechanism had activated. There was a soft click, and the padlock fell open. I should have stopped there, should have closed the padlock, gone upstairs, called a realtor, and put the house back on the market. But curiosity, or perhaps something more sinister, drove me forward. I removed the padlock and pushed the door open. Beyond lay a small chamber with rough stone walls, clearly older than the house itself, perhaps dating back to colonial times. In the center stood a stone pedestal, and upon it rested a gnarled piece of wood about 2 feet long, a branch or root that resembled the twisted tree from the carvings. The room was cold, unnaturally so, and the shadows in the corners seemed to pulse with a life of their own. As I approached the pedestal, the branch began to emit a soft, greenish glow, and the shadows grew more agitated, swirling around me like smoke. Inscribed on the pedestal were words in an alphabet I didn't recognize, except for one phrase that matched symbols from Willowbrook's journal, symbols he had translated as the tree between worlds. This was it, the focus of Willowbrook's ritual, the anchor he had created to summon his shadow tree, and somehow, impossibly, it was still active. As I stared at the branch, the shadows in the room began to coalesce, forming shapes that were almost human but not quite. Elongated limbs, features that shifted and flowed, and they were whispering, dozens of voices overlapping. Another has come, the cycle continues. The tree must feed. Terror finally overcame curiosity. I backed toward the door, but the shadows moved to block my path. Not solid enough to stop me physically, but intimidating nonetheless. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. Join us. Become shadow. Feed the tree. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, switching on its flashlight. The bright LED beam cut through the shadows, dispersing them temporarily. I seized the opportunity to dash through the door, slamming it behind me and replacing the padlock with shaking hands. Even through the door, I could hear the whispering, now angry and frustrated. You cannot escape. The house is ours. You are marked. I fled upstairs into the reassuring light of day, but I knew the truth now. Willowbrook Manor wasn't just haunted in the conventional sense. It was something far worse. A doorway to something inhuman, something that hungered. Over the next few days, the manifestations intensified. Shadows moved openly now, not just at night but in broad daylight. The whispers became audible conversations that fell silent when I entered a room. Objects relocated when I wasn't looking. And the tree carvings. They were definitely changing, the branches extending further across walls and surfaces reaching toward me. I stopped sleeping in the master bedroom, moving to the living room couch with lights blazing all night. But even there, I would wake to find shadow figures standing over me, dissipating when I screamed or turned on more lights. I tried leaving several times, but something always prevented it. Sudden illness that passed as soon as I unpacked. Car troubles that mechanics couldn't explain. Urgent work matters requiring my immediate attention. It was as if the house, or whatever dwelled within it, was determined to keep me there. Research became my obsession. I devoured everything I could find about shadow entities, interdimensional beings, and occult tree symbolism. Most was useless New Age speculation or academic theory, but occasionally I found something that resonated with my experience. Accounts of shadow people that fed on fear or life force, rituals designed to close doorways between worlds, protective measures against non-physical entities. I began to understand that Thaddeus Willowbrook hadn't just discovered something ancient. He had bound it to his bloodline and his home, creating a self-perpetuating cycle. The shadow tree needed periodic feeding to maintain its connection to our world, and it used the house to lure in suitable hosts. The previous owners hadn't just left because of ghost sightings, they'd fled for their lives. And those who couldn't flee became part of the tree, which was exactly what it wanted from me. The journal offered one possible solution, a counter-ritual that Willowbrook had designed as a safeguard but never implemented. It required dismantling the anchors he had created, primarily the carved panel in the master bedroom, followed by a specific incantation at the pedestal in the basement. It was desperate and dangerous, but I was running out of options and time. The shadows were growing stronger, more substantial. Twice now I'd felt cold, almost physical hands grabbing at me from darkened corners. The whispering had become a constant background noise, and the branch in the basement, which I monitored via a webcam I'd set up, glowed brighter each day. I gathered tools, chisels, a small saw, sandpaper, and approached the tree panel in the master bedroom. The moment my chisel touched the wood, the house reacted. A violent tremor ran through the building, like an earthquake centered on the bedroom. The shadows in the room solidified into vaguely humanoid shapes that lunged at me, their touch bringing intense cold and weakness. I fought through it, hacking at the panel with desperate strength. Each blow of the chisel sent visible shockwaves through the shadows, disrupting them temporarily. As pieces of the carving came loose, I noticed something disturbing. The wood was veined with what looked like tiny capillaries, oozing a dark, sap-like substance that smelled of copper and decay. The house itself seemed to be in pain, groaning and shuddering with each piece I removed. The shadows grew more frenzied, their whispers becoming screams of rage and fear. But as more of the panel was destroyed, they also seemed to be weakening, becoming less substantial. Finally, the central portion of the carving, the trunk of the tree, was all that remained. As my chisel struck it, there was a sound like glass shattering, though nothing visible broke. The shadows retreated suddenly, swirling together into a tornado-like formation before racing downward, presumably toward the basement. I had disrupted one anchor, but the primary focus still remained, the branch on the pedestal. Gathering my courage, I descended to the basement, armed with a powerful flashlight and Willowbrook's journal, open to the page describing the counter-ritual. The locked door now stood open, though I was certain I had secured it earlier. Inside the chamber, the shadows were in chaos, swirling and twisting around the pedestal, where the branch now glowed bright enough to cast the entire room in sickly green light. The whispering had become a cacophony of desperate voices. "Stop! You don't understand. We need you. The cycle must continue." Following the journal's instructions, I began reciting the incantation. Latin mixed with something older, words that felt wrong in my mouth, as if they were never meant for human speech. With each phrase, the light from the branch dimmed slightly, and the shadows became more agitated. Then came the final step. I had to touch the branch while completing the incantation. As my fingers made contact with the gnarled wood, a jolt of energy shot through me, and suddenly I could see them clearly. The shadows were people, or had been once. Thaddeus Willowbrook was there, still recognizable from photographs I'd found, along with dozens of others spanning different eras, previous occupants of the house, all consumed by the shadow tree. Their life forces used to maintain the bridge between worlds, and I understood the terrible truth. Willowbrook hadn't created this ritual as a path to immortality. He'd been tricked by whatever entity existed on the other side, lured into creating a doorway it could use to feed. He was just its first victim, not its master. The branch grew hot beneath my touch, burning my fingers, but I forced myself to maintain contact as I spoke the final words of the ritual. The green light flared blindingly bright, then abruptly extinguished. The branch crumbled to ash, and the shadows, the trapped souls, seemed to dissolve, their whispers fading to blessed silence. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then the ground beneath me began to shake violently. Cracks appeared in the walls of the chamber, spreading outward. The house was collapsing, or being pulled apart from within. I ran, barely making it up the basement stairs before they crumbled behind me. Throughout the house, the tree carvings were disintegrating, the wood rotting away before my eyes. I grabbed only my phone and car keys before fleeing outside, making it to the edge of the property just as Willowbrook Manor imploded with a sound like 1,000 voices screaming in unison. Where the house had stood remained only a smoking crater, at the center of which grew a single sapling, its trunk twisted in a familiar pattern. I sold the land immediately, warning the developers who bought it about the site's history. They laughed it off, of course. 6 months later, a new housing development stands there. 12 modern homes arranged in a circle around a community green, where that sapling now grows as a healthy young tree, its branches reaching towards the surrounding houses. I dream of it sometimes, of shadows moving between its branches, of whispers carried on the wind. In these dreams, I see the new families moving into those houses, unaware of what grows at the center of their community, of the anchors being established in their homes, of the cycle beginning anew. And sometimes, when I'm between sleep and waking, I feel the cool touch of shadow fingers on my face and hear a familiar whisper. The tree remembers you. ending hook. Could a single ancient ritual truly create a bridge between worlds? What happens to those who become trapped within the shadow tree? And most chilling of all, how many other Willowbrook manors exist across America, their dark histories buried beneath renovations and real estate listings? If this story resonated with you, take a moment to look around your own home. Have you noticed any unusual shadows? Any carvings or symbols left by previous owners? Any spaces that feel unnaturally cold, or where you feel watched? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever lived in a house where things didn't feel quite right? Where shadows seemed to move on their own? Share your story, and maybe we can piece together if the shadow tree has spread its branches beyond Willowbrook Manor. If you enjoyed tonight's tale, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the thin veil between our world and others. Click the notification bell so you don't miss next week's story, where we'll explore another American legend that keeps people awake at night. Until then, sleep well, and maybe leave a light on. After all, you never know what might be gathering in the corners of your room, watching, waiting, whispering. Story number 4. Hey there, fellow adventurers and night owls. If you're listening to this while tucked away in bed, you might want to double-check that your windows are locked and your doors are secured. What I'm about to share with you isn't just another campfire tale or internet legend. It's something that happened to me last summer. Something I've been trying to make sense of ever since. Something that still visits me in my dreams. If you've ever felt that prickling sensation on the back of your neck, that instinctive knowledge that you're being watched by something that doesn't belong in our world, then you might understand what I experienced. For everyone else, consider this your introduction to the real mysteries that exist in the shadows, just beyond our comfortable reality. Before I dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Trust me, after hearing this story, you'll want to know when I post the follow-up about what happened when I returned home, and the evidence I brought back with me. Leave a comment below with your own unexplained encounters. I need to know if anyone else has seen what I saw. The story begins now. I'm Alex Mercer, a wildlife photographer from Portland, Oregon. I've captured images of elusive creatures for years. Mountain lions, wolves, and even a wolverine once. But nothing prepared me for what I encountered in the foothills of Sierra Madre Oriental in Mexico. It was supposed to be a simple 2-week expedition. The magazine I freelance for wanted a photo essay on nocturnal animals native to northern Mexico. I'd done similar assignments dozens of times before. I flew into Monterey on a Tuesday. The air was dry and warm. I rented a dusty blue Jeep Wrangler and loaded up my gear. Cameras, specialized night lenses, infrared equipment, camping supplies, and enough trail mix and beef jerky to last me through the apocalypse. My contact was a local guide named Miguel, recommended by a colleague. We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Miguel was in his 50s, with deep laugh lines around his eyes and calloused hands that spoke of a lifetime spent outdoors. "The places you want to go," he said over coffee, his accent thick but his English clear, "they are not for tourists, not even for most locals." He studied my face. "There are stories about those hills, Mr. Mercer. Old stories." I smiled. I'd heard similar warnings before. Every region has its myths. "I'm just there for the wildlife, Miguel. Maybe some coatimundis, ringtails. Perhaps, if I'm lucky, a jaguar or two." Miguel didn't return my smile. He simply nodded, a gesture that somehow felt more like resignation than agreement. "We leave at dawn tomorrow. The drive is 4 hours. The last hour is not good road." That was an understatement. The final stretch to our base camp location was barely a road at all. We arrived at a small clearing surrounded by dense forest just as the afternoon light began to fade. The air smelled of pine, and something else I couldn't quite identify, something earthy and ancient. As darkness fell, the forest came alive with sounds. Insects chirping, distant howls that might have been coyotes, the occasional rustle in the underbrush. Miguel prepared a simple dinner over the campfire. We ate in relative silence, the flames casting long shadows across his weathered face. "Tomorrow I show you good spots for your animals," he said finally. "But tonight we stay close to camp." "Yes?" I nodded, assuming he was concerned about navigating unfamiliar terrain in the dark. "Sounds good. I could use the rest anyway." It was as I was preparing my equipment that Miguel approached me again. His voice lowered. "Mr. Mercer, there's something I should tell you." He hesitated. "The people in the village below, they do not come to these hills if they can avoid it, especially not at night." "Because of the terrain?" I asked, testing my infrared flash. "Because of El Chupacabra." I paused, looking up at him. The name was familiar, a legendary creature said to attack livestock, draining them of blood. It was a relatively modern myth, first reported in Puerto Rico in the 1990s. "You believe in the Chupacabra?" I kept my tone neutral, respectful. Miguel shrugged, his gaze drifting to the darkness beyond our campfire. "What I believe does not matter, but in the past year something has been killing animals in these hills. Not just killing, emptying them. No blood, strange wounds. The ranchers have lost dozens of goats and chickens, even a cow last month. Probably feral dogs," I suggested. "Or maybe a puma with unusual hunting habits." "Perhaps." His tone made it clear he didn't believe that explanation. "Just stay close tonight. The first night is always when it comes, if it comes at all." That night, as I lay in my tent listening to the symphony of the forest, I found myself thinking about Miguel's warning. The first night is always when it comes. What an odd thing to say. I must have drifted off because... The next thing I knew, I was awakened by sound. A soft, deliberate sound that my sleep-addled brain couldn't immediately identify. It took me several seconds to realize what it was. The careful, measured tread of footsteps circling my tent. Too heavy for a small animal, too deliberate for a wandering deer. I lay perfectly still, my heart hammering against my ribs. The steps continued their slow circuit, pausing occasionally as if whatever was out there was listening, trying to determine if I was awake. Slowly, trying not to make a sound, I reached for my flashlight. My fingers had just closed around it when the footsteps stopped, right outside the entrance to my tent. I held my breath. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, and then a sniffing sound, like an animal scenting the air, but not quite like any animal I'd heard before. It was more deliberate, almost curious. And then came the sound that still haunts my dreams. A low, rattling growl that seemed to start deep in the earth and vibrate up through the ground beneath me. It wasn't loud, but it contained a quality that set every hair on my body standing on end. It didn't sound like any predator I'd encountered before. It sounded wrong. Fundamentally wrong. As if whatever was making it wasn't meant to exist in our world. I lay frozen, afraid even to breathe. The growl continued for perhaps 15 seconds, and then silence. Complete and absolute silence. Even the insects had gone quiet. Slowly, the forest sounds resumed. Whatever had been outside my tent was gone, or at least it had moved away. I waited another 10 minutes before I dared turn on my flashlight. With trembling hands, I unzipped my tent just enough to peer out. The campsite was still and peaceful. The embers of our fire glowed a dull red. Miguel's tent was zipped up tight, no sign of movement. And there, in the soft earth outside my tent, footprints. But not human footprints, and not quite animal prints either. They were roughly triangular, with what looked like 3 toes or claws at the front. Each print was about the size of my hand, and they formed a perfect circle around my tent before leading off into the forest. I quickly zipped my tent closed and huddled in my sleeping bag, the flashlight clutched in my hand like a talisman. Sleep was out of the question now. All I could do was wait for dawn and wonder what exactly was out there in the darkness, watching and waiting. Morning couldn't come fast enough. As the first gray light filtered through the trees, I emerged from my tent, exhausted but alert. Miguel was already up, stoking the campfire and heating water for coffee. "Did you sleep well, Mr. Mercer?" he asked, his expression giving nothing away. I hesitated, then decided to be direct. "Something was outside my tent last night, Miguel." I gestured to the footprints, still clearly visible in the soil. "Something that made these..." Miguel barely glanced at the prints. "Coyote, perhaps. They are curious animals." That was no coyote. I kept my voice steady. Whatever it was walked on two legs. It circled my tent and it made a sound I've never heard before. Miguel busied himself with the coffee, avoiding my gaze. These mountains, they play tricks on the mind, especially the first night in a new place. We spent the day hiking further into the hills. Despite Miguel's expertise, we saw little wildlife beyond birds and squirrels. It was as if the animals were in hiding, sensing something that we could not. As the light began to fade, Miguel suggested we return to camp. I agreed, though a part of me wanted to set up a night blind and see what emerged after dark. After dinner, Miguel retired to his tent early, claiming fatigue from the day's hike. I remained by the fire, reviewing my photos and planning the next day's expedition. The night was clear, the stars bright and numerous. I must have dozed off because suddenly I jerked awake, disoriented. The fire had burned down to embers. What had awakened me? I listened intently, hearing only the normal sounds of the night forest, and then a sound that didn't belong. A soft, rhythmic clicking, like someone rapidly tapping their fingernails against wood. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I reached for my flashlight, sweeping its beam around the campsite. Nothing. The clicking stopped. "Miguel?" I called softly, wondering if he was awake and moving around. No response. His tent remained still and silent. I stood and decided to add more wood to the fire. As I bent to pick up a log, the clicking sound returned, louder now, and definitely coming from the forest to my left. I swung my flashlight in that direction. For a split second, I saw something. A flash of movement, a gleam of reflection from a pair of eyes too high off the ground to belong to any normal forest animal. And then, nothing. The clicking stopped, replaced by that same low rattling growl I'd heard the night before. It raised the hair on my arms, sending a jolt of primal fear through my body. "Miguel!" I called again, louder this time. "There's something out there." Still no response from his tent. I hurriedly stoked the fire until it blazed high and bright. Most predators fear fire. It's an instinctive thing. Whatever was out there, I hoped it shared that instinct. The growling continued, seeming to circle the campsite just beyond the reach of the firelight. I stood with my back to the flames, turning slowly to keep my eyes on the darkness surrounding me. And then, at the very edge of the light's reach, I saw it. A shape that made no sense, spindly and somehow wrong in its proportions. It stood upright, but not like a human. More like a giant insect balancing on its hind legs. Two glowing red points reflected my flashlight's beam. Eyes. Eyes that contained an intelligence that sent ice through my veins. I stood frozen, unable to look away from those terrible eyes. They held me, mesmerized, as the creature took one step forward into the very edge of the firelight. Now I could see more of it. A body covered in what looked like scales or perhaps short, coarse fur. A head that was too large for its body, with a protruding snout. Those eyes, set wide apart, glowing with a terrible awareness. And its arms. Dear God, its arms were too long, ending in what appeared to be three-fingered hands with long, curved claws. It was the chupacabra. It had to be. Nothing else could look so alien, so wrong. As we stared at each other across the boundary of firelight and shadow, I felt something I'd never experienced before. A sense that I was being studied, evaluated. Not as a threat, but as prey. The creature tilted its head, those red eyes never leaving mine. And then it opened its mouth, revealing rows of needle-like teeth, and made that awful clicking sound again. It wasn't a random noise. It had a pattern, a rhythm, almost like language. I fumbled for my camera, driven by professional instinct even in the grip of terror. If I could just get a photo, just one clear image. The creature's posture changed instantly. It dropped to all fours, its body language now unmistakably predatory. The clicking stopped, replaced by that bone-chilling growl. I abandoned the camera idea and instead grabbed a burning branch from the fire, holding it out like a torch. "Get back!" I shouted, my voice sounding thin and frightened even to my own ears. To my amazement, the creature hesitated. It seemed to consider the flaming branch, those alien eyes reflecting the dancing flames. Then, with a motion so fast I could barely track it, it turned and was gone, disappearing into the darkness with barely a sound. I spent the rest of the night feeding the fire, keeping it blazing as high and bright as possible. Sleep was unthinkable now. All I could do was wait for dawn, and hope that whatever I'd seen wouldn't return before the saving light of morning. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten when Miguel emerged from his tent. He took one look at me, wild-eyed, exhausted, still clutching the now extinguished branch, and his expression grew grave. "You saw it," he said. Not a question. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak immediately. After taking a swig from my water bottle, I managed to croak out, "You knew. You knew it was real." Miguel looked away, busying himself with rekindling the fire. I suspected. The stories, they have been more frequent lately, more detailed. Why didn't you tell me? Anger was beginning to replace fear now that daylight was returning. You let me come out here knowing that thing was in these woods? Would you have believed me? His question was simple, direct. If I had told you that El Chupacabra was real, that it hunted in these hills, would you have taken me seriously? Or would you have thought me a superstitious old man? He was right, and we both knew it. I would have nodded politely and privately dismissed his warnings as folklore. "I need to get a photo of it," I said after a long pause. Miguel's head snapped up, his eyes wide with alarm. No, Mr. Mercer. This is not like your mountain lions or wolves. This creature, it is not natural, not safe. I'm a wildlife photographer, Miguel. This is what I do." Even as I spoke, I wondered at my own sanity. That thing I'd seen last night wasn't wildlife in any conventional sense. It was something else entirely. "Then you will do it alone," Miguel said firmly. "I agreed to guide you to photograph normal animals. Not this. Not El Chupacabra." We spent the day hiking to a different area, a series of rocky outcroppings. By late afternoon, I'd managed to photograph a mountain lion, a rare kit fox, and several raptors. Under normal circumstances, I would have considered the day a profound success. As we made our way back to camp, Miguel grew increasingly tense. He kept scanning the forest, his hand often straying to the large knife at his belt. I noticed that we were taking a different route back, a longer one that kept to more open areas. "You're afraid it might be active during the day," I said, not really a question. Miguel didn't answer directly. "The old stories say it prefers the night, but hunger can change the habits of any predator. What else do the old stories say about the chupacabra?" He was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. Finally he spoke, his voice low and serious. They say it is not of this world, that it came from the stars long ago. They say it collects, takes samples. Samples? You mean like specimens? Blood, tissue. It studies us, learns about life on this planet. His eyes met mine, and there was a depth of belief there that sent a chill through me. The animals it drains, that is not just feeding, it is research. We reached camp as the sun was setting. Miguel immediately set about making a fire, larger than the previous nights. "I will keep watch first," he said. "You should rest. We leave at first light tomorrow." I nodded, retreating to my tent. I was exhausted. The sleepless night before catching up with me all at once. Despite my plans to set up a blind to try and photograph the creature if it returned, my body had other ideas. I barely had time to remove my boots before sleep claimed me. I dreamed of red eyes in darkness, of clicking sounds that almost formed words, of long, clawed fingers reaching, touching, examining. I awoke with a start, my heart racing. The tent was pitch black around me. What time was it? How long had I slept? Fumbling for my watch, I pressed the light button. 2:17 a.m. I'd been asleep for hours. Something felt wrong. The forest was too quiet, too still. Even the insects had fallen silent. And then I heard it. That soft, rhythmic, clicking sound right outside my tent. Close. So close, I could almost feel the vibrations through the thin fabric. My blood turned to ice in my veins. It was here, right here, inches away from where I lay. The clicking stopped, replaced by something worse. A sound like sniffing, as if the creature was scenting me through the tent wall. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing, my eyes fixed on the spot where the sounds were coming from. Slowly, something pressed against the tent fabric, a protuberance, a snout perhaps, creating a bulge in the nylon. It moved along the wall of the tent, still sniffing, still searching. I had to do something. I couldn't just lie there waiting for it to find its way in. My camera was within reach, the flash already attached. If I could just get one photo. Moving as slowly and silently as possible, I reached for the camera. My fingers had just closed around it when the sniffing stopped. The pressure against the tent wall disappeared. Had it gone? I strained my ears, listening for any sound of movement. Nothing. Absolute silence. And then a new sound. The slow, deliberate rasp of claws against nylon, starting at the bottom of the tent and moving upward. It wasn't trying to tear through the fabric, not yet. It was testing, examining, studying the strange barrier between us. I clutched the camera, my finger finding the power button. One photo. Just one clear photo of this thing. And even if I didn't survive the night, the world would know. Would have proof. The scratching stopped at the top of the tent. There was a pause, and then a new pressure against the fabric. Larger this time, more deliberate. I realized with horror that it was pressing its face against the tent, trying to see inside. Now or never. In one fluid motion, I powered on the camera, aimed it at the bulge in the tent fabric, and pressed the shutter button. The flash exploded in the darkness, momentarily illuminating the interior of the tent and the silhouette pressed against it from outside. A head. A horrible, elongated head with what appeared to be spines or quills running down its length. Even through the fabric I could see those eyes, red, glowing, and now fixed directly on me. There was a moment of absolute stillness, then a high, keening screech that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. The tent wall ripped open, claws slashing through the nylon as if it were tissue paper. I scrambled backward, still clutching the camera, firing off another flash even as I moved. The second flash caught the creature in full view, that terrible face with its protruding snout, the rows of needle teeth now fully exposed in what might have been a snarl or a grimace of pain. It recoiled from the flash, those red eyes blinking rapidly. The moment of distraction was all I needed. I lunged for the tent opening, bursting out into the night, screaming for Miguel as I ran. "Miguel, it's here!" No response from his tent. No sign of him anywhere in the campsite. The fire was down to embers, casting just enough light for me to see that I was alone. Completely alone with that thing. I could hear it moving inside my shredded tent, recovering from the surprise of the flash. I had seconds, at most, before it would be after me. My frantic eyes landed on Miguel's tent. If he wasn't there, maybe his pack was. Maybe he had a weapon, something I could use. I dashed across the campsite, tearing open his tent flap. Empty. His sleeping bag was there, his backpack, but no Miguel. With shaking hands, I ripped open his backpack, praying for a gun, a bigger knife, anything. My hand closed around something cool and metallic, a flare gun. Emergency rescue equipment. I spun around just as the creature entered the ring of fading firelight. In the dim glow, it looked even more alien, even more wrong. It stood upright now, its body swaying slightly, those terrible eyes fixed on me with an intelligence that seemed to pierce right through to my soul. It took a step forward. I raised the flare gun. It paused, head tilting, studying the object in my hand. Another step. I fired. The flare erupted from the barrel with a whoosh, streaking towards the creature in a blaze of brilliant red light. It struck its chest, bursting into searing, chemical flame. The creature's screech was deafening, a sound of pain and rage that seemed to shake the very air. It clawed at the burning flare, succeeding only in spreading the chemical fire to its arms and face. Writhing in agony, it turned and fled into the forest, its burning form visible for several seconds before it disappeared into the darkness. The screeching continued, growing fainter as it ran, until finally the night was silent once more. I stood trembling, the empty flare gun still clutched in my hand. Had I killed it, wounded it, or merely driven it away temporarily? And where was Miguel? As dawn finally broke, I began gathering my surviving equipment. I couldn't leave without knowing what had happened to Miguel, and I couldn't leave without my camera, the camera that contained the only photographic evidence of the chupacabra's existence. It was still in my ruined tent, where I'd dropped it in my desperate escape. The damage was even worse than I'd remembered. Great tears in the fabric, the aluminum poles bent and twisted by a strength that seemed impossible for a creature of its size. My camera lay on the ground inside, apparently undamaged. I snatched it up, immediately checking the display. The most recent images were there, blurry, chaotic, but unmistakably showing something that should not exist. I called for Miguel repeatedly as I packed up what remained of our camp. No response came from the silent forest. When I reached the Jeep, I found Miguel's small day pack on the passenger seat, along with a sealed envelope bearing my name. With trembling fingers, I tore it open. Inside was a single page, covered in Miguel's neat handwriting. Mr. Mercer, if you are reading this, then you have survived, as I hoped you would. Forgive me for not being more honest with you from the beginning. The creature you encountered is indeed what the locals call El Chupacabra, but it is much more than a simple predator. I have been tracking it for 20 years, ever since it took my brother from a campsite much like ours. In all that time, I have learned only a few certainties about it. 1. It is not from this world. Whether it came from the stars, as legend suggests, or from somewhere else entirely, I cannot say. 2. It is intelligent, perhaps more intelligent than us, but in ways we cannot comprehend. 3. It is studying us, learning about life on Earth, collecting samples for some purpose we may never understand. 4. It can be hurt, as you may have discovered, but I do not believe it can be killed, at least not by any means available to us. I have gone to lead it away from you. By the time you read this, I will likely be dead or taken for study, but my sacrifice will have meaning if it allows you to escape with the evidence you have collected. Tell our story, Mr. Mercer. Make them believe. Miguel. The drive back to Monterey was a blur. My hands shook on the steering wheel, my mind replaying the events of the past 2 nights in an endless loop. Those eyes, that clicking sound, the way it had studied me, evaluated me, like I was nothing more than an interesting specimen. When I finally reached civilization, the normalcy felt jarring. People going about their daily lives, unaware that such creatures existed in the world just beyond their comfortable reality. I checked into a hotel, immediately connecting my camera to my laptop. The images were even more disturbing on the larger screen. That elongated head, those needle-like teeth, those intelligent, terrible eyes. This was proof that would shake the foundations of science, of our understanding of our place in the universe. I was booking a flight home when my phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Do not share what you have found. Not yet. Meet me. Cafe Oro. Noon today. I have information about Miguel. Come alone. At noon, I sat at a corner table in the cafe. A woman in her 50s slid into the seat across from me. My name is Lucia Vega. Miguel was my cousin, she said. He called me the night before he disappeared. He told me if anything happened to him, I should find you. I'm sorry about Miguel, I said. He saved my life. He was hunting that thing for 20 years, she replied. Ever since it took his brother, my brother too, our family has tracked it for generations, Mr. Mercer. We are guardians of a sort. She explained that her ancestors called it El Visitante, the visitor. They believed it came from beyond the stars, studying Earth and its creatures like scientists study ants. They come every few decades, collecting samples, observing, she told me. Usually they avoid human contact, but occasionally they become curious about us. They? My blood ran cold. There's more than one? We believe so, yes, though rarely more than one in any given area. I showed her my photo. She studied it for a long moment before speaking. This is the clearest image anyone has ever captured, she said. Clear enough to convince even the skeptics, perhaps. But you do not understand the danger, Mr. Mercer. These creatures are aware of us in ways we cannot comprehend. If you expose their existence too widely, too quickly. What are you suggesting, then? I asked. A careful approach. Work with those of us who have studied them for generations. Share your evidence selectively with those who will help rather than exploit or sensationalize. She gave me a business card for Dr. James Keller, a researcher at the University of Arizona who specialized in cryptid phenomena. And what about Miguel? I asked. The local police found his backpack this morning at the base of a cliff. There was blood, quite a lot of blood, but nobody. You think the creature took him? I think Miguel knew exactly what he was doing when he led it away from you, she said firmly. He made his choice, Mr. Mercer. Now you must make yours. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've worked with Dr. Keller and a small team of researchers, sharing my evidence and helping to establish a monitoring program in the hills where I encountered the chupacabra. We've been careful, methodical, avoiding publicity while gathering more data, and we've found more evidence. Strange tracks, livestock deaths with the characteristic wound patterns, even brief glimpses of the creatures themselves. Always at night. Always watching, studying, learning. I haven't returned to those hills, not yet, but I dream of them. I dream of red eyes in darkness, of clicking sounds that almost form words. And sometimes, in those dreams, Miguel is there. Not dead, but changed, transformed. Studying alongside the visitors, his eyes holding the same terrible intelligence, the same hunger for knowledge. I can't be sure what it all means. But one thing I do know, they are watching, learning, waiting. If you ever find yourself in the wild places of this world, in the shadows between civilization and wilderness, and you feel that prickling sensation on the back of your neck, that certainty that you're being watched, don't dismiss it. Don't rationalize it away. Look up. look around, and be prepared to run, because the chupacabra is real, and it's not alone. Hey, thanks for sticking with me through this entire story. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe to catch more of my encounters with the unexplained. In the comments, let me know if you've ever experienced that feeling of being watched in the wilderness, or if you've had your own strange encounters. I read every comment, and who knows, your story might inspire my next investigation. And if you're wondering about what happened when I returned home, and the strange occurrences that have followed me since that night in Mexico, well, that's a story for another time. Sweet dreams, everyone. And remember to check that your doors are locked tonight.